As a GP, it's always frustrated me that mental health research tends to focus on individual interventions, a medication, an online module, a focused psychological strategy, but never what works over time. So I'm so grateful for ACT Health's Research and Innovation Fund and their faith in me and my team to look longitudinally across the experience of young people and their GPs over a year of care. We knew it would take diversity to explore diversity, and so we built a team with multidisciplinary perspectives, a variety of carer and consumer lived experience, different ages, roles, identities, and marginalisations. As mental health workers, we knew that who we were was just as important as what we do. We felt the same as researchers. There is no way we would have got young people to engage deeply if we couldn't establish ourselves as compassionate and trustworthy witnesses. Jamila, our young social work student, who's now a fully fledged clinician, was critical, being the main safe point of contact for participants, maintaining relationships throughout the project, and organising times and places to meet that felt right for participants. We surrounded our team with a young person's reference group, and they taught us a lot about current experiences and preferences of their generation. And we also surrounded ourselves with an experienced steering group of experts. So, what did we find? Well, firstly, we needed to acknowledge the shifts that occur in the therapeutic relationship over time. We interviewed 15 young people and their GPs over 12 months of their care. We recruited predominantly through GPs because we wanted to ensure the young people we interviewed were competent to consent and stable enough to talk to the researchers about their experiences. The young people we met had a variety of ages, identities, experiences and marginalisations and relied on a variety of services. They were remarkably articulate and generous with their time. We met in parks, in shopping centres, schools and libraries all over Canberra and nearby New South Wales. We bought a lot of coffee, snacks and pizza, and we made sure they got home safely with Uber vouchers. We even chatted as we pushed a baby around the park, and yes, we gave them vouchers to recognise the importance of their time. We also met their GPs, who were rather surprised to be paid for their time. They were also remarkably generous. We knew that recruiting this way meant we interviewed the best of the GPs with the best therapeutic relationships with young people, but we thought that was a positive thing. After all, we were trying to understand what works well as what doesn't. Young people who access mental health services often started with a therapist or a counsellor or a service as a child, and they told us that those relationships were often dominated by their parents. Some felt marginalised by that, telling us that the problem started because of the relationships they had at home. So having their parents as part of the therapy meant they didn't feel safe talking to their therapists about their own experience. By the time we were interviewing them, most had progressed to a point where they were seeing someone on their own, although their parents were often facilitating those relationships, coming into the consultation at the beginning or end and paying for the therapy. Young people talked about how difficult it was to learn to manage that consultation alone, including how to choose a therapist, get to an appointment, set the agenda, and where necessary, to leave. The GPs talked about scaffolding that transition, helping young people move towards independent consultations and improving their health literacy by teaching them how to access and use health services effectively. I wanted to talk in this session about what matters in that critical relationship. One of our participants had a wonderfully creative way of explaining this. Sometimes, they said, it's like you go to these places that are supposed to provide evidence-based care, and you take this precious vase full of all your previous experiences and thoughts and memories, and you gently hand it over to the therapist. And they take it and put it on a shelf and they follow a manual. When they see this, they never go back. In fact, this same participant was rather scathing about outcome tools, which I'll talk about in the next session. What makes Headspace so needy, they said. I mean, every time you go there, you have to fill out forms to say how fabulous they are. I reckon they have unstable attachment. I do see what they mean. What they want is an authentic relationship. They need to know they're relating to a human. I need to know the person with me is a person, one of our participants said. Like, not in a creepy way though. Like my first psychologist, I remember her telling me she got anxious when she was my age, and it made me feel like she really understood me. We know that from the educational research that young people learn best from teachers they respect in a community environment. They need to know they're seen and heard and understood, and this means finding their tribe. Developmentally, they're learning who they are and who they want to be. The people providing care need to do what teachers do, balance evidence with individual attention, which made us think about what it meant to have their GPs. We became aware that these GPs created a sort of circle of security for the young people we interviewed. They lent trust to the person that they referred to and helped the young person break the ice with the new therapist. The GPs talked about setting up that relationship by sharing what they know about the person and why they think it might be a good fit. They also saw them afterwards because sometimes relationships don't work out. In a way, they held a safe haven for the young person to make sense of this new relationship and way of working. For this presentation, I wanted to talk about some other ideas that emerged from the data, starting with learning and learning theory. We know that younger adolescents like to learn from each other, and so at school there's a focus on peer learning. Collectivism learning theory is the idea that learning is based in collective relationships, and it couldn't describe better the tendency of younger adolescents to seek out their tribe on TikTok. As they mature, adolescents begin to consult one-on-one, being brave enough to see someone like me on their own, maybe with mum or dad sitting slightly behind them, trying to encourage them to talk at first, but then gradually slipping out of the room. The key here is Vygotsky's theory of proximal development. People don't learn something they already know, and they don't learn something if concepts are way out of their reach. They learn when they're on the edge of their existing knowledge. To do this, the teacher in the relationship needs to understand their own illness narrative, how they see the world and where they're open to change, so they can set the therapeutic curriculum, that next step along the journey, without losing the critical therapeutic relationship that keeps that young person feeling safe. This is also critically important because young people learn by adding to their existing understanding, so they construct and reconstruct models of how the world works, social constructivism. So if we think about these young people, they're being taught a PDHPE curriculum in schools. The curriculum changes all the time. We need to work with teachers to develop developmentally appropriate and integrated materials to build on what's being taught. One of the outcomes I hope for in this study comes from a participant who suggested a resource given every few years to stick on the fridge to help parents understand the likely challenges faced by kids of this age and the resources available in the ACT for help if these challenges get too much for the kid or their parents. We should be able to do this here because we're such a small jurisdiction. Developmentally, the task of adolescents is to work out who they are and who they want to be. We had long discussions around mental health. Is this what you have, or is it who you are? How does it integrate with the way you see yourself as a person? The model of illness that you create guides your sense of self, and adolescents have the right to explore this and not have it imposed on them. In our study, we saw early adolescents search TikTok and other sources to find their tribe, and the label really mattered to order their understanding. It's like their commitment to being goths or any other sort of social group. It becomes very solid in early adolescence. Over time, of course, their understanding becomes more nuanced and they are more able to see their mental health as a complex and layered part of who they are, what they had, and the life that they experienced. This work of constructing identity is critical. We need time to help them explore, not just master techniques. Finally, I wanted to talk about the idea of candidacy. To young people, ED involves an audition and they rehearse their presentation with peers, not because they're manipulative, because they're desperate. They can't necessarily define what they want, but they absolutely know they can't endure the situation that they're trying to escape. This leads to some quite sad outcomes, including one of our gender diverse participants talking about their costume, having the special pink shirt that she wears in ED, so she is taken more seriously. Young people are very aware that they're competing for a very precious opportunity to get care and health services. They know about competition, and they know that winning means knowing the rules of the game, including the underlying rubrics in assessment. So they get together one way or other and try and work out what the admission criteria really are. I asked if they stopped needing to audition once they'd been accepted into care. Apparently not, but I did ask if they performed for their GPs. Oh no, they said, but your GP does help you to rehearse. In this environment, we have to ask what is the value of so-called objective outcome tools? Are young people who are trying to get the right answer not necessarily reflecting their state of mind? And if so, the privileged ones, the ones who can read and strategize and have health literacy and can rehearse, won't they be more likely to get care? The data thinks they are. So, to summarise, our study learned about the importance of identity formation in this group, which includes a lot of conversations about what the diagnosis means and how it can help or hinder a young person's sense of agency. We learned that who the therapist is matters just as much as what they do. Without an authentic, mutually respectful relationship, young people don't feel safe to do the work they need to do. And continuity really matters. Our study suggests it's time we work with teachers and refine our health curriculum to match, or at least not clash, with the school curriculum. We have much to learn from teachers about the strategies to engage adolescents at different ages and stages, and we need to communicate that shared understanding to ACT families. Finally, we need to think about candidacy. In an environment where serious mental illness is so much less funded than minor illness, we have a situation where desperate young people are driven to perform their illness in order to secure the care they need. And in that circumstance, what does all our so-called objective data actually mean? To close though, I wanted to highlight something about the GPs because times are changing. We finished interviewing a year ago and I was surprised when putting this presentation that every single one of the excellent GPs that we interviewed have either exited general practice or have exited the ACT. Mental health care is an ecosystem and that ecosystem needs to be sustainable. As usual, when you introduce a new element into an ecosystem, it can benefit or disadvantage different species. Because of the changes in Medicare, we are driving these GPs, the excellent mental health GPs, out of the profession. And we need to think what we're going to do to replace this long-standing, exceptional care that so far has been within reach of young people like these. If you want to watch either of my presentations, you can click on those links. The second one is on my research on why GPs are leaving.